Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City of Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Monday, March the 2nd. Roll call, please.
Mark Vanneman, absent. Bruce Pauley.
Here.
Ron Edwards.
Here.
Chad Kiger.
Here.
And Lori Gross. Here.
We've got 4 of the 5 here tonight. Now we need approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. New business for tonight, docket number 20-19, Stephanie Strawlam, is that correct? That's correct. I got it right. Is requesting a development standard variance to allow a one-car attached garage. This is to be located at 303 North Meridian Street. The property is zoned central business. We've got a design standards change for the garage. Ben?
Good evening, board members. Just to walk you through this a little bit, I'll have to go old school with paper on the overhead again because the computer's still not working right, unfortunately. Give you an idea what we're looking at here. I have to zoom in a lot because it's small as well. Right. Now we can see it a little better. This was a home that was remodeled year and a half ago and then sold to the applicant. And she approached the planning department about the idea of putting an attached garage on this house. And as you can see, this is not a very large size lot. This is actually a situation where the original lot, as you can see, was lot 7 that included both of these properties. This had been split off at some point historically to build another home, so we're left with about 2/3 of what would be an original lot. So we looked at it with Ms. Strawlam to see if there was a way we might be able to fit some sort of garage on here attached to the house to give her some off-street parking in a covered space. And we're able to fit what essentially is an oversized one-car garage, as you can see in the corner of the house right here. This is in the central business district, so they have 0 front setbacks off of the streets. So she could be as close as possible to that property line. It does meet the side setback to the east. But there is just not enough room on this property to get a full 2-car garage here. If we did that, you would start encroaching on that adjacent property there. And as you can even see, you probably can't see it very well, but because it's not showing up here, but actually the home that's on that property to the east actually encroaches on this property a little bit as it showed in this survey. So the idea of putting this garage any closer than possible to that side property line just really isn't terribly feasible. Just cause too many issues for the proximity to that property line. So what we've done here, what she's proposing here is an oversized one-car garage that would be attached to the house in the location shown there. She's intending, and she'll show you here in a second on the overhead, she's got some really fantastic drawings she put together that show you the overall construction of the garage and how she's intending to match the siding of the house so it looks appropriate for that house. And just so you know, this isn't a historic preservation district, so she'll have to go through the HPC to get the architecture approved as well. So it will have to be appropriate to the style of the house and design of the house. So that's it in general. In terms of the staff report, I've kind of gone through the basics there. For the record, I do have findings of fact that meet all 3 criteria. And finally, the recommendation, City of Lebanon Planning Staff recommends approval of the Development Standards Variance Request to permit relief from the attached 2-car garage requirement of the Unified Development Ordinance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Got 2. What is the dimension from the garage to the property line? I couldn't read it.
Is it the south property line or the east property line?
The east property line.
I think it's about 8, it's a little over 8 feet.
Is there any, okay, thank you. Is there any setback or anything from was that North Street to the front of the garage or anything?
So this is zoned central business. Central business has a 0 front yard setback adjacent to any street. So theoretically, she's 2.1 feet off of that property line. She could be 0 off of that front. and still meet the appropriate setback for the central business district. So she does meet the required setbacks on the front because there is a 0 setback there.
So is that the back of the sidewalk then? Is that what you're going
Roughly,
off of here?
it's probably not exactly the back of the sidewalk, but it's close to it.
Because it looked like, as I drove by there, it looked like very narrow sidewalk.
Yeah, it's
2 or
probably
3
either a
foot.
4 or 5 foot sidewalk.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, now we'll hear from the applicant if she cares to step forward and give us a little information.
I don't know what I'm doing up here, Ben, with this projector. So if you've driven by there during the day, you know there's not really great parking. It's very difficult to get a spot by my own house. So right now, there's just some concrete kind of stoop there that's it really needs to be torn down in general. It's in bad condition, and I wanted to use that area to try to make this garage, which will be 17 by 20, so.
Okay?
Are you going to tie the roof into the garage to the house?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Fernando? Okay, it is a public meeting. Does anybody care to step forward and speak anything about it? Seeing nobody's going to step forward, we'll close the public end of the meeting. Ben, you got anything further to say? Okay, since there's no questions, entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve 20-09 with, there's nothing written elsewhere that I see, so as is.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Did you take roll, Kelly?
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Congratulations. Good luck. Our last item on the docket, 20-10, is the property is located at 224, 309, and 310 South Lebanon Street. The property is zoned central business, is within the downtown overlay district, and comprised of 1.83 acres. Ben?
All right, I'll give you a quick project overview and then walk through the technical details of the 6 variance requests that we see here. And then I'll let the applicant kind of tell you the story of this project. This is something we've been working on with them for probably 18 months, probably close to 18 months. It's a pretty challenging site overall. You've got a couple, probably 3 buildings that are going to have to be torn down to accommodate this. Then you're also dealing with the old railroad right-of-way. It kind of makes this a challenging site from a shape perspective as well, trying to make everything fit. So just to walk through this a little bit overall, we'll start with the site plan here. For those that are familiar with this area, this is the proposed conditions, but on the east side of the road, this is where the old Estes building sits on the east side of the road. A majority of this west side of the road is the paved parking area where Estes parked their inventory. And then just at the far north end of this is the New Life, the 2 buildings that New Life used to own that are now owned by the applicant. So they would be tearing down the Estes building on the east side of the road and the 2 buildings owned by New Life on the west side of the building, or on the west side of the road. This will physically attach to the buildings that will be remaining to the north here. So it is recreating that streetscape a little bit. The buildings do sit a little bit further back off the road than they did previously to create a wider sidewalk area, maybe some outdoor seating and that sorts of things. So just to walk through this in general, this is a 4-story mixed-use building. The first floor would include retail and restaurant space for lease, and then the upper 3 floors will be market rate apartments of various sizes, starting with some smaller ones that would be studio apartments, and then there'd be some primarily 1-bedrooms and then some 2-bedroom apartments on 3 floors. They have parking both to the rear that you see here on the west side of the road with the connection then to West Street, and then also a parking lot on the east side of the road. So the overall proposal or concept for this site is that this would be a Phase 1 building you see on the west side of the road. And they're providing a parking lot on the east side of the road to provide its parking requirements. The intention long-term, and I don't have a definition for long-term yet, is that this would be a temporary parking lot that would ultimately be replaced by a Phase 2 building that mirrors what's on the west side of the road. That can't happen until we have a longer-term, what I'll call a parking solution for downtown. It could be a parking lot somewhere else. It could be structured parking in an appropriate location, but that's something that would have to be considered before we could do Phase 2. But anything you see on the west side of the road here is a permanent long-term solution. The east side of the road provides their parking short-term. The intention is to provide a second building at some point in the future and then replace its parking requirements in another location close by. So there would still be parking that would be adequate and accommodate this site. Probably also, if it's a structured parking, accommodate other uses in downtown. So the proposal before you tonight is got a couple different components to it in terms of the variances being requested. Some of them are related to the temporary nature of the parking lot on the east side of the road. For example, they're not proposing to install all the required landscaping if they come in 3 or 4 years from now or 5 years from now and tear it all back out. It's just inefficient to do that. So they have provided some landscaping to dress it up, but not necessarily all the landscaping. Some of it can be transplanted, but it's a lot harder to transplant everything to be provided. In addition to that, the other element of that that they're looking to do, again, because of the temporary nature of the parking lot, typically if you're going to design a parking lot with curb on all the way around, then you'd have storm sewer drains and somewhere in the center of the parking lot that would drain it to the center and then through underground pipes to the storm sewer. Again, that's a pretty costly piece of infrastructure to put in if you're going to turn around and tear it back out in 4 or 5 years. So what they're intending to do is that they would curb the 3 sides, the south, west, east, and north sides. On the west sides, they would leave it open so you could sheet drain water into what would be right now a swale across that front. It would drain in that swale to the southwest corner, where it would go into a beehive. It's close to the storm sewer down here towards the south end of this parking lot. So it is a much more efficient or cost-efficient solution for a short-term parking lot to be able to sheet drain into that swale, as opposed to putting the infrastructure that would be under this entire parking lot to bring it down to that storm sewer. So that relates to that temporary nature of the parking lot. So I'll just walk through here some of the other overall design elements. And related to the variances. So the first one is a parking setback. They're asking for to vary from both the 10-foot front setback and the 5-foot side setback requirement. And it's in a few different locations. So here on West Street, what they're proposing is a 5-foot setback rather than the 10-foot setback. They could meet it, but it would reduce the number of parking spaces, and we felt like it was more important to have a couple more parking spaces than it was to go from 5 to 10 feet. They're still providing the landscaping around that perimeter of the parking lot that would dress it up. If you go out there right now, you're not going to see much of anything out there other than gravel/pavement. So this is an improved condition over what we see now. So that is one of the setback variances, and then you'll also see along the north and east sides of this parking lot here on the east side of the road. Again, when you start looking at trying to provide an appropriate setback off the front, then you got, the 20-foot parking spaces and get your drive aisles. When you get to that point, you're only leaving 2 or 3 feet on this east property line. Again, right now it's paved and developed all the way up to that alley. So again, even if there is a little bit of a grass strip there, that's an improved condition over what it is now. And again, with this being kind of a temporary 4 to 5 year parking lot, it's not necessarily something we're going to need a permanent solution. But just looking at trying to provide the adequate parking aisles and parking space depths you really run out of space when you get to that east end. Again, it's possible either to shorten the spaces or narrow the aisles. It felt like it was better to make sure that those parking spaces and drive aisles were all the appropriate dimensions, rather than looking at trying to reduce that or increase that setback on that east and north property lines. So that's the nature of the request for the parking setback variance. Number 2 is parking space dimension. So I just said we're trying, in most cases, to keep the parking space dimensions adequate. When you look at this west parking lot, because of the shape of this property here, that's the old railroad right-of-way. So they've got a kind of an interesting situation back there where they've got a diminishing property width as you get further west. So they've been able to accommodate an appropriate drive aisle, that's 24 feet, but then these parking spaces, they're just not able to get the 20-foot depth, so they've got them at 18 feet in depth there, and that makes sure that we've got a 5-foot setback on both sides, so we can put some landscape in there and dress up this permanent parking lot. So again, not an ideal situation, but that's created by a piece of property that's been this way for a long time. The railroad that doesn't necessarily exist anymore, but still causes us challenges to this day because of the way it ran through town. Railroads put in their rail lines exactly where they wanted to and without regard to what it does to the properties they leave behind. But in this case, we're able to work around it and still provide adequate parking spaces. The reduction from 20 to 18 feet is not going to be a huge challenge unless everybody drives a pickup truck like I do. For the third variance request, parking lot curbing, I mentioned this one already. They will provide all the required curbing on the west side of the road, which is their permanent parking lot. On the east side of the road, they will curb 3 sides of that. It's only this west side where they're wanting to leave the curbing off so they can sheet drain into that swale. So that would be the nature of the request there. And again, that's just related to the temporary nature of this parking lot, not having to install that permanent underground infrastructure that'd be necessary for a permanent parking lot. Variance request number 4, parking lot landscaping, and this is again related to the east side. On the west side, they've proposed all the required landscaping. On the west side, we did place a condition on that variance request that they would meet the parking lot perimeter landscaping requirement on this west side of the road. They have already updated their site plan to show it meeting that requirement, so they've already met the condition that was placed on the variance request, so they have done that. On the east side of the road, as you can see, they are providing some landscaping. You see they've provided a number of trees around the parking lot perimeter and in the interior islands. So they are providing some of the landscaping, but to meet the landscaping requirements, they'd have to add additional shrubs along that perimeter and then also do trees and shrubs around that entire east and north sides. 1, there's not room for it, and 2, there's not much benefit provided there. It's right up against the alley. So, yes, sir.
Those are trees, not shrubs?
Those are trees on the east side of the road.
Are they gonna be, they're gonna be far enough back they can pull up, look both directions?
Yes, yes. So that's the nature of the parking lot landscaping request. It's really primarily related to that east side of the road with some of the reductions of setbacks. You don't quite have the room to make that fit, and then just with the temporary nature, it's more efficient just to plant some landscaping, just knowing that 4 to 5 years from now, it's all going to get taken back out. And request number 5 and 6 are related to the building itself. And again, they're going to have much better images than I do because I'm working with paper, but just this kind of gives you an idea what this building will look like. This would be the east side elevation that's on South Lebanon Street, and this is the rear elevation. Let's walk through. So this is, again, I mentioned a 4-story building. When we created our central business standards 12 years ago, I think we envisioned 4-story buildings, and the thought then is that 50 feet was an appropriate height in order to build 4-story buildings. We do have, it's primarily 2 to 3-story buildings downtown. We do have some 4-story buildings or taller in the downtown. So the idea here, the process or the philosophy when we created that standard of 50 feet was that it would allow for 4-story buildings. As you look at, the modern requirements for commercial retail space and then for, ceiling heights and your typical market rate apartment today, they're requiring taller ceilings. And you get to the point where the main part of the building is it's bumping up against 50 feet. And then as we were looking at the architecture of the building, this has gone through the Historic Preservation Commission and it has been approved. It was appropriate, we felt like, to create some offsets in the building that you would see represented here to somewhat be complementary to our existing downtown. This is obviously a much longer building facade than our historic building facades. We typically have 20, maybe 25-foot wide buildings, and they all have varying architectural materials and different facades, so it breaks it up a little bit. Here we've got one long building, and we're looking to try to create some architectural detail. that dresses up that front and is somewhat complementary to our existing downtown because it creates the look of having separate buildings along that front. So again, this is one of those where they could meet the requirement at 50 feet because the primary part of the building is at 50 feet. But really to create the architectural interest in the building, it was necessary to get some of that additional dimension there. And this was something that the Historic Preservation Commission they really emphasized that to create some interest in that facade. Just to kind of walk through the materials, this is brick. Then you've got a material that would kind of match a stone. It's not a natural stone material, but it's a manufactured stone material that would be across those fronts. And then you've got two different colors of brick that would be on those upper floors. You see in the back here, they're using masonry block on the lower levels, and then there's EFIS panels on the upper floors, and that is what would face west. On the south side, you would see it mimic that stone and masonry on the south side as well. So they have provided a very nice elevation that was approved by the HPC. Again, we're just really looking at providing some interest on that height and giving them a couple extra feet did that in terms of creating some sort of issue with the downtown for those extra 2 to 3 feet. We really didn't feel that there really was any sort of issue with that. And then the final one would then be the minimum living area per dwelling unit. The requirement is that the minimum living area for multifamily use would be 600 square feet. When the applicant was looking at the market and looking at the appropriate mix of units for this building, they felt, and they'll walk through this in more specifics here in a little bit, they felt like there was some demand both for smaller studio and one-bedroom apartments up to some larger two-bedroom apartments. So their mix is upper 300 square feet. I think it's about 380 square feet for the studio apartments, and then ranging up to much larger than that for the two-bedroom apartments. I think they have a couple of floor plans for the one-bedrooms that are just right under 600 square feet, but I would say probably 75% of the floor plans are over the 600 square feet. Just their entry-level smaller apartments are slightly smaller than that 600 square feet, down closer to 400, where they're seeing the market for those studios and one-bedrooms. So in this case, again, 12 years ago, we were trying to look at that minimum square footage. I don't know that I know what the thought process was behind the 600. Is probably similar to what we had before and similar to what some other communities were doing. But when you look at urban living now, and I guess we're not necessarily downtown Indianapolis, but if you're looking at urban living, the push is more for some of those smaller, more affordable units, but with nice finishes, which is what they're proposing to do here. So again, they're looking to vary from that minimum living area per unit to allow some smaller studio apartments down to about 380 square feet. In terms of the findings of fact, I won't take the next 20 minutes to read all the findings of fact I put in the staff report, but for the record, they are available in the staff report for each of those 6 variances. And then staff has recommended approval of each of the 6 variances. On the parking lot landscaping requirement, we did place a condition on there that they meet all the applicable parking lot perimeter landscaping requirements on the west side parking lot, which, as I'd shown you, they have already done that. So we have recommended approval of those 6 variance requests.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the entrance and exit into the plaza and to the rentals, we just have one crosswalk, and you got another door to the north, looks like to me.
So you want to see the site plan or the elevation? What would be most helpful?
Up here.
Yeah, be up the top, up.
So
There's
there,
one crosswalk over to the east side.
yeah, we're showing one designated
Okay,
crosswalk.
then there's another, look like a entrance onto the, so it'd be to the north.
Second facade.
Are you speaking of this little
That
bump
it?
out here?
Uh-huh.
So what they've done is they're also proposing some parallel parking spaces on Lebanon Street.
Right.
So that's more just a bump out
Okay. Okay, I
to
see
provide ways for cars to
I
get in
see
and
that.
out. Yeah, so this would be the only designated crosswalk down here at the south end of the building.
So will that be the only entrance to the rentals and to the,
So the upper floors will have their own entrance. I've got a floor plan. I can show you that if you want to see how it lays out.
oh, that's okay.
But yeah, there's one of these entrances on the front of the building is an entrance to a lobby area that would have elevators to go to the
Okay.
upper floors. The rest of the entrances you see on the building.
But it is near the crosswalk.
It is north of the crosswalk.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. I need to go back to that drawing.
You want the elevation?
No.
Oh, just the site plan? Yeah.
Site plan. Over on the Estes property,
Yeah.
I'm seeing, or am I seeing, excuse me, an entrance or exit from the parking lot into, I guess, it's a back alley. Is that what that is?
Yes, and I think that's essentially in the same location where you can get into the alley now.
Is that alley paved, or will it be paved?
It is paved. I wouldn't say that it's paved well. It probably needs to be repaved, but it is paved now.
Okay. Next question, let's go other side of the street, that other parking area, next to the dumpster enclosure.
Yes.
Is all of that grass area, the square footage of that meet the requirement? I mean, is that excessive for that? Here's my, here's my question.
Uh-huh.
You're asking for 18-foot vehicle spaces.
Yes.
My truck's, what, 20, 21 feet?
That's why, yeah, that's
And that'd really screw up the parking. And
Yeah.
I guess my question, and I realize you got your 5-foot setback there on the west side, but once you get down 3 or 4 spots, if you could somewhat taper that asphalt to where longer vehicles could park there.
Yeah, you might be able to. Then you'd run into an issue once you get closer to the dumpsters too, with the way they're angled. That space would have to be 18. So there may be some that you could make a little bit longer with the jog in the parking area. I don't know if you get a whole lot of benefit out of doing that. I would say 80% of vehicles are going to fit in that space, no problem. That's just folks like you and I that drive a pickup truck that will park on the east side of the road, so there's plenty of room for us.
Okay?
But yeah, theoretically, you could widen that out in the middle and get some spaces that are longer. I don't know if it offers a whole lot of benefit to doing that. Then you'd have to figure out how that affects the drainage of the parking lot and make sure water gets back to the inlets appropriately as well. And I'll let the engineer talk about that. So yes, it's theoretically possible to widen some of those in the middle there. You just have a jaw. At the two ends, you'd have the shorter 18-foot spaces, and the ones in the middle be longer. The spaces up by the building are all 20 feet here, and these are all 20 feet across the road. So there's a lot of
Okay.
20-foot parking spaces if necessary. It's just the ones that are in this area in the back where it gets narrower.
Hey, Ben, this being mixed use,
Yeah.
does that mean that it is subjected to residential or multifamily and commercial business?
Yes.
Zoning ordinances?
Yeah, in terms of parking requirements, or?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Specifically parking requirements?
Yes. So, and in fact, they're actually overparked for what our requirement is. Not significantly overparked, but they have probably 10 or 15, maybe close to 20 spaces more than what our requirement is. And they've essentially parked the number of spaces in terms, again, of market. And banks don't loan you money if they don't think there's enough parking spaces either.
Right.
So they have gone through all those processes. But they do have more parking spaces than are required.
How many units, floors 2 through 4?
I'll let them answer that. I don't recall off the top of my head. Is it 30-something? 41.
And our parking requirement per unit?
It varies on the size. If it's a studio or a one-bedroom, it's 1.5 spaces per unit, and anything above that is 2 spaces per unit.
Okay. How about on the commercial side?
It actually depends on the use. So what we did here is we took a general parking requirement of basically 4 per 1,000, and then applied that here. So if it's a restaurant, it's the number of seats, 1 space for every 4 seats plus 1 space for every employee on the largest shift. So we can't calculate that right now. So we used a more general, 4 per 1,000 requirement, which is a fairly typical standard to use on general commercial space. And then because it's a mixed-use building, you have a shared parking calculation. If you really want to get into it, there's a huge, long spreadsheet that I had to fill out. There's a shared parking calculation because what happens is during certain times when the residential uses need more parking spaces, some of the retail needs less. So you go through that, and then whatever the largest number is, depending on the time of the day, that's what you use for the parking requirement.
Well, then again, it depends on the retail too, right?
Correct.
Could be something that's more popular at night versus.
I think their intention is, that corner space on the south end, they've designed it for a nice restaurant, whether it's a sit-down restaurant or a
But on
microbrewery.
the north side?
On the south end of the building where it would
Okay.
be most visible as you're coming up Lebanon Street. And they've got a nice patio area to the south where they could have outdoor seating and stuff like that too.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now it's time for the applicant to step forward and see what he has to say.
Okay, my name is Adam D'Angelo with Forza Commercial Real Estate, founder and one of the principals of our commercial real estate development company. As soon as I get this pulled up here. Just enter the code in again. Thank you. Thank you. My computer's thinking, so bear with me. Okay, so as I want to thank you guys for having us tonight. As Ben articulated earlier, it's been a journey that we've really enjoyed coming alongside and contributing hopefully in our way to your guys' community. I'm a Boone County resident, and grew up in Hancock County, but my wife was from the area, and so we made our home here in Boone County, and really are grateful to be in this position to be able to hopefully provide this kind of enhancement to this project. So Ben's got to know me pretty well. It'll be difficult for me to keep this probably to 5 minutes, as long as I can talk. So bear with me. I'll try not to put anybody to sleep. But I think today was really about not only going through the variances, but also just getting a familiarity with who we are, some of the projects that we work on, and more specifically, this project that's become really a passion for myself and my partner, John Fleming. So as I said, I founded the Commercial Real Estate Development Company in 2015, alongside being a commercial real estate lender for Merchants Bank of Indiana. During that time period, my friend and real estate attorney John Fleming from Densmore and Blatchley had approached me and indicated that he would be interested in partnering and coming alongside in this vision to continue to enhance and redevelop secondary market towns or communities here in Indiana. So our strategy really has been meeting with numerous communities throughout Indiana, and I will say you guys have a tremendously talented staff and leadership. As we go to meet with a variety of different folks, it's very refreshing to have really such talented group that you guys have here throughout the entire department and staff. But our company really focuses on a couple of core disciplines. It's really focusing on core urban town redevelopment, new development, this project being a good example of that, but also renovating existing workforce housing projects throughout Indiana. Generally, we're either renovating and or building new product throughout Indiana. And so I'll just kind of go through some of the various product types that we're currently working on or have worked on here in the past. This is a 23-unit apartment complex that we acquired about 18 months ago and recently sold it for a little bit of a higher incremental price. And this was right on Wabash College's campus, directly next to my real estate partner's fraternity house, oddly enough. So after coming in and renovating the property, we went from $1 square foot in rents to nearly $1.80 on average in rent, market rate apartments. One of our core pieces of business that we focus on is providing quality housing to various communities. And it comes in multiple forms, as I mentioned earlier, in urban settings like we're proposing here tonight, but also single-story garden villa projects that we have throughout different communities that are either in process or have been stabilized. This particular project here is in LaPel, Indiana, where we built 60 units in total, and they are a market rate shared wall dwelling. And it's as I mentioned on the slide there, a $7.4 million project. that continues to enhance that part of Madison County and north side of Indianapolis. Our focus really is also not only higher quality materials on the outside, but also on the inside. So we came in and applied not tiny home concepts, but concepts that will provide a higher level of finish quality and hopefully provide a more efficient construction cost. As costs of construction continue to rise, we try to find the very best ways to provide a higher quality product that will last the duration and have a longer lasting life. We're also building a complete PUD project. This will be a new style of project for us. This is a complete village in McCordsville, Indiana, near where I grew up, on a 14-acre parcel. They'll have fourplex condominiums that will be for sale, both 2- and 3-bedroom layouts. We'll have some duplexes that will be for a sale product, and as well as some single-family lots. So somewhat of a Villages of West Clay concept, and will be a nice complement to our portfolio, but also to the community there in McCordsville. The Bedford building. So this has been a very fun project. We came in and partnered with the city of Wabash, as well as Grow Wabash, the county there, and Wabash Marketplace, which acts as their community development corporation. Came in and restored this particular building, perfecting historical tax credits, but also you just can't help but not love the building. I mean, it's a gorgeous building, circa 1900. So that was a lot of fun. The mayor was very pleased after seeing that project directly out of his window get revitalized over the last 14, 15 months now. So we're now in the process of moving our first tenant into the building. This particular project's right up the road here. This is the old Pizza King, and or otherwise known as Village Station on Zionsville Road there, just south of the village in Zionsville. We're actually in the process now, after acquiring the building, going through and putting a new tenant in. Our tenant, Hotel Tango Whiskey, is actually going in front of the Planning Commission in Zionsville actually on Wednesday, to go forward for building permits and tenant nearly 6,000 square foot of that building. So we're very excited to bring an old client of mine in Hotel Tango Whiskey, but to bring that kind of brand and product and continue to build out the village in Zionsville. Now for our feature presentation. As I said, we're very excited about coming alongside and in our small way, providing something hopefully that's complementary to your guys' already authentic downtown scene and environment here. This particular site, if you guys know it's historic for a couple different reasons, as Abraham Lincoln came through this particular area on 2 different occasions. And so we want to pay some homage to him, and we're working diligently to come up with hopefully some kind of concept, and Ben is going to be like, when are you going to get that done probably, but we'd like to do some form of something to dedicate in addition to the memorial that's there for Abraham Lincoln, whether it's a mural or something on the side of the building that is a little bit of an homage to him and also to the town of Lebanon. This is in the TIF district, and it's in an opportunity zone, which provides some enhancements both for our operative businesses that would occupy the lower levels as well as the investors in our particular projects. As we mentioned before, 41 residential units would be on floors 2 through 4, and we'll go through the studio 1-bedroom sizes and square footages here momentarily. The lowest level, the commercial space, we have just right at about net 10,264 square foot that we propose to put in. We are talking to various restaurateurs, as well as a myriad of distiller and or brewers. So hopefully we'll have some exciting news here in the near future. As Ben mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about the variance applied here for the unit sizes and unit mix. We actually recently received our market study back, our third-party market study from Valbridge Appraisal Services here in Indianapolis. And it had indicated to us that our projected unit sizes for studios ranging from 354 to 383, and one bedrooms from 512 to 642, was directly in line with not just some comparisons here in the market, but also sizes and comparisons here throughout the greater Indianapolis area. So we have a total of 9 one-bedroom units that will be less than 600 square foot, but as we talked about earlier, 75% of those one bedrooms and or two bedrooms would be greater than 600 foot, going all the way up to nearly 800 square foot for a two bedroom. And the studio, which we only have 6 studio apartments proposed for this particular project, range from 354 to 383, in line, again, with some market comparisons from the flats to Slate Run and a few other notable projects listed here on this particular slide. As we talked about earlier, one of the variances that we're applying for is building height. So you do see some variation at 2 to 3 foot as Ben articulated earlier. Primarily to really accentuate various parts of the building and various entry to the lobby for the rental units, but also for our anchor retail tenant on that end, as you were discussing earlier, the crosswalk will meet right in that area. We're finding, just to give it a little bit more of hopefully an aesthetically pleasing look, but also a more defined entrance or entrance points to the building and structure, helping give a little bit of a break to the building too. And Ben had articulated earlier as well, some of the limited green area. This was the original proposed plan as we went through this process. As he said, over the last 18 months, the plan has evolved, and we've taken direction from staff and our engineer, as well as our architect, to hopefully continue to enhance that based on those recommendations. So we had some variation from the original plan to the new plan, which Ben showed earlier and is listed here as well. A little bit smaller here. I need to zoom in on that maybe. So you can see with that diminishing property line in the back, we're trying to maximize as much as we can the number of parking spots, but also to meet setback requirements, which makes it very challenging in the back, and still meet the landscaping buffer requirements. And Ben had talked about earlier the temporary proposed parking lot across the street. I have a good feeling that once this project stabilizes, we'll be able to come back and discuss Brakeman 2 or, a re-envisioned second phase across the street, and maybe a phase 2 or phase 3 to continue to build out your guys' core and enhance the existing downtown core. So that concludes what I had. I think I was probably about 5 minutes longer than I should have been, so everybody's still awake. Is there any questions or anything that I can answer?
Questions from anybody?
I think I'm good.
Okay. We also have our engineer here, Aaron, who will answer any technical questions in addition to Ben if you have other questions. So, thank you.
Does this go clear to the alley now?
In the back?
No, on the north.
No.
It doesn't, it stops at the liquor store, correct? The tavern?
So, we have,
Leaks.
Yeah, so if you look at the north end of this building will attach to Club 39, and then the alley runs back behind the
Okay.
parking area back here. So yes, it is physically attached to Club 39.
right.
Okay.
So we've worked very diligently with our engineer and structural engineers as we go through the construction phase and process to make sure that it's structurally reinforced, that adjoining wall, as we want to make sure that it's a quality finish, but also from a technical standpoint, a building standpoint, that it meets code and is structurally reinforced the right way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it for right
Okay.
now.
All right, thank you.
This is a public meeting. Anybody from the public care to step forward?
Good evening, Paul Van Clay, 404 North Meridian. I just had a few observations. The Estes lot, what is the existing drainage on that? Is that also the sheet drainage, or does it have? It drains the street. Okay, and then the crosswalk across, is that going to be a marked crosswalk like we have on Main Street by the post office? Or is it just going to be? Okay. And then as far as the temporary parking lot, I guess what assurances will the city have that if there isn't a continuation, you know, if the parking lot remains as is for 10, 15 years or more? That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, can you address any of those? Okay. Anybody else care to speak? Then I will close the public hearing and let Ben talk.
So in terms of the crosswalk, as y'all know, this is an NDOT state road, so we'll be working with NDOT to know exactly what they will let us do. The first question is, will they let us do a crosswalk? We don't know the answer to that question yet, but we're going to be approaching them in the very near future to discuss that. I think what we would prefer is some sort of pedestrian activated signal so that they can hit a button and it'll, the yellow lights flash so they know that somebody's crossing. That would be our goal, is to do something like that, to provide some sort of a pedestrian activated signal. Don't know if the state will let us do that, but that's kind of our goal there, is to provide something that has a little bit additional than just markings on the road. So, but we will have markings on the road, hopefully some sort of signal that they can activate to cross. In terms of assurances, I could probably talk for the rest of the night about what the project agreement looks like that's between the city and the applicant. But in terms of that, the Community Development Corporation will retain ownership of the east side of the road. So we aren't selling that lot to them. We're allowing them the ability to use it for their parking short term. So that they will not have long-term control of that parking lot. So if something changes, they decide 5 years from now that they're not interested in this market anymore, they move on, we have the ability still to retain control of that, and if there's another developer interested or something like that, we can sell to somebody else and redevelop that site as some structure. So that's the assurance there, is that we will retain ownership, we'll retain control. We're giving them permission essentially to use it in the short term to meet their parking needs, but we'll retain control on whatever future for that property is. So it will, and we're calling it a temporary parking lot, but it is a paved parking lot with curbing on 3 sides. It meets some of our landscape requirements as well. So it's not going to look like a temporary parking lot like you typically see a construction lot or something like that. It will look like a permanent lot. They just have asked for a few variances to allow some variation, in particular where you're going to be putting things underground you have to tear out later. That will help some of the costs up front before it gets torn out. But so we will retain ownership. We'll have control of what happens to that property in the future.
Thank you. Got one question for applicant. How many of the studio, yes, the smallest unit, how many of those will you have, and what is a square foot?
There are 2. They're going to be 354 square foot.
274?
354, yes. Again, focusing on open concepts and higher quality of finishes, commensurate and/or hopefully even nicer than what's been developed here with the flats in Lebanon.
I just feel that a little under 400 square foot is too small, but.
It's interesting. Our market study reveals, a demand for an interesting dynamic is we're seeing more and more both older and younger generations that are interested in moving into a community that has a product that is smaller but a higher quality of finish. And we're seeing some apartments down as low as 300 for a studio, which I think is even a little more silly. But nonetheless, we wanted to try to tailor the building and the unit mix and sizes to our audience, alongside meeting the various building code and variations. So we wanted to try to provide a little bit of undulation between each dividing suite. Anytime you turn a corner, obviously, you're creating a little variation to what that size or design of what that unit looks like. So we tried to minimize the number of floor plans that we could throughout this process. That's a long-winded answer, so I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you limit the applicant to have 1 through 4, whatever, people per studio?
Good question. So our leases are tailored to each individual property, but historically on all of our properties, for a one-bedroom apartment, your maximum number of occupants you can have on that inside the apartment at any given time is two particular people, and those people have to be on the lease. If you're in a 2-bedroom apartment, the maximum number of occupants you can have is 4.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
How are you going to control access to the parking lot on the east side of the, so like, let's say I work downtown, right? And, ooh, look at all this new parking.
Therein lies some additional challenges that we're going to make sure we're going to have to address throughout this process, similar to creating controls within the building. So only tenants can go up to their units and that from the lobby area. We're going to have key fob access for that. But as far as parking goes, we will have permits for each one of our tenants to be able to hang in each one of their rear view mirrors. But as Ben was talking about earlier, to meet the shared parking calculation that's universally accepted, we're overparked by about, I think it's almost 10 spaces, 8 to 10 spaces. That is the one challenge.
Will each of your retailers have designated parking for their customers?
So they won't have, at this point, we don't have planned designated parking for our retailers, but it is something I think we probably should look at and address, both for the workers within that, but also for consumers. They're going to be coming in and either dining or shopping or going to work on, do a workout in a local cycling studio or gym inside the building, so.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we want to, I still got a problem with variance number 6. I don't know why, but I feel that 400 square feet is too small. So, Ben, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, certainly as you look at, the market demand for unit sizes and for a studio apartment, I mean, 400 sounds small, but in terms of looking at floor plans and layouts, that's really kind of the accepted unit size for something like that. If you're a single professional, not looking for, a 1-bedroom apartment to have the space to be able to maintain, the studios really are appropriate. And just, he just handed me the flats, the comparable studio size units are about 400 square feet in the flats. So they're a little bit smaller than that. But in terms of looking at market demand, the demand is going towards smaller units. There are folks that are still very active, want to be out and about and don't want a large apartment to maintain. So it does, like I said, it meets all code requirements in terms of what's required in there. I'm not concerned about the sizes necessarily. Again, I couldn't even tell you what the thought process is where the 600 came from, but that's a pretty good-sized one-bedroom apartment. That's pretty large. So if you're looking at trying to provide something smaller for that single professional just looking for a small apartment in an urban setting, it's an appropriate size.
That's less than 20 by 20.
Yeah, they're
20 is
long and
400.
narrow. Yeah, so it doesn't have a separate bedroom in it. It is a honest to goodness studio. It is basically one open room. So if you were looking to try to provide a separate bedroom, yeah, it would be larger than that, but this is something where it's just essentially one open concept room with a bed and a small kitchen and dining area. So it's meant to be small and efficient.
Do you have a floor plan, or do you have a floor plan of that particular unit?
I do, if you can take me a moment to pull it up.
Please.
Yeah.
So I can do that?
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, Ben, you have it out here, don't you? Yeah. Well, I was gonna say,
Mouse, yeah. Yeah, you can flatten all that stuff. Is that what you were going to show him?
yeah, I was gonna show him, yeah,
Yeah, if you can kind of identify how the layout, I think what he's looking for is the actual floor plan.
oh, the floor plan itself, okay, got it, I can pull that out. Bear with me here, guys, pull this up. I was just reviewing these again today, so bear with me. Oh, I think I breezed right by it. Okay, I'm going to do my best to zoom in on this. Okay. Is that a little better? I guess, can everybody see that? You want me to zoom in one more time?
No, that's good.
Is that good? Okay. It's interesting, Mr. Pauly, I would agree with you now that it's interesting that the market and the demand asks for this, but what I may choose, or some folks may choose, may not necessarily be fitting for a certain type of individual, whether it be a professional and/or, somebody that works here in the park, or a commuter back and forth from Lafayette and/or to Indianapolis. It seems like the millennial generation seems to be very drawn to this particular unit size from when we went through our market study, but also when you just look in general at demographic, infographic information for apartments here, not just in Indiana or greater Indianapolis area, but throughout the country. This seems to be what everybody's gravitating towards, a smaller footprint and a higher quality of finish. It's a little less to take care of, but also conducive for what their needs are.
Did you have 2 studio units that fall below the 400 square foot?
Oh, pardon me, 6. I misstated that, yeah. So it's 354 to 383, and there's 6 studio units.
Okay.
2 of them are at 354.
What's the total breakout of unit sizes that you have?
The unit mix,
Yeah.
I should have wrote that. One moment.
Yeah, 41 total, correct?
41 total, and 75% of them are greater than 600 square feet. I do know that, but let me get the exact mix. I'll try to get our unit schedule. Go ahead.
It's okay. I think you answered my question, which was really how many of the total units fall below the 600 square foot mark.
Okay,
So-
gotcha. Yeah, well,
And you say two of them are at 354?
correct.
What's the next break above the 354?
They go up to, the remaining four are 383 square foot for the studios. And those would be the smallest units available in the project. Primarily, again, to me, when you look at the demand for the number of market rate rentals within the market study, both completed by the town and recently by Valbridge Appraisal Services by our organization, we wanted to try to maximize the greatest number of units that we could get into the building in order to accommodate that demand. As your market will absorb greater than 80 units, market rate units, rental apartments each and every year, and we're only meeting about half that with this particular project. Let's continue to look for the unit mix. Is there any other questions? Because I know we just changed this.
What happens after 5 years and you build Bregman 2 on top of the temporary parking? Ultimately, your parking needs double.
Yeah, so that's where I got into. It's the city would partner with them to look for a longer-term solution that addresses all of the parking needs essentially south of the square. I would guess, if we're looking 5 years out, that solution is structured parking in some way, shape, or form that would accommodate their parking needs for both Phase 1 and Phase 2 and any other potential reuse or redevelopment is happening on the south side of town. So yeah, so we would have to look for some sort of adjacent site that would accommodate structured parking
If someone
at that
was-
time.
If someone was to come in tomorrow and want the parking area, they were going to build a larger whatever, what would it do to his parking?
Well, so we can't, our agreement says we can't allow
5
somebody to
years.
redevelop unless we've provided an alternative
Okay.
parking solution.
Okay.
So and they essentially have first right of refusal, so if we have somebody else come and approach and we'll go to them and say, hey, you guys interested? And if they say no, we can move on. But we do have to accommodate their parking with some other
Okay.
solution before that could happen.
But just for 5 years, correct?
Well, no, there's not necessarily a time limit.
Okay.
I just use that as.
All right.
It'll construction on something like this is gonna take 18 months. So by the time it's constructed and stabilizes, it could be 4 to 5 years for we're talking about Phase 2. Then we gotta figure out how to come up with the money to pay for a big, 300, 400 space parking structure. But, that's certainly how I would envision we would accommodate parking in this area. If other properties continue to redevelop, we're gonna need some sort of much more dense parking solution than service parking at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm still having trouble with request number 6. So unless I hear anything different from the board, I would like to take the first 5 variances in one vote, number 6 in a vote.
I'm personally okay with the square footage on the studio. I think it's pretty common.
Yeah.
It might be new to us, but most areas that are being developed, I think it's a pretty common size.
Okay. Okay, then I'll withdraw that request. Guess I'd entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve docket 20-10, the 6 variances that were presented to us this evening.
I would second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Kelly?
Bruce Polly?
No. Nay.
Ed Kiger?
Aye.
Ron Edwards?
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Motion carries. Good luck. Okay, I think that's all we've got on the agenda. Our next meeting would be April 6th, Monday, April 6th, at 7 o'clock. If I don't have any other requests or comments or concerns, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned until 7 PM on April 6th.